Welcome to the National Debate. I'm Madhavdas Gopalkrishnan. Viewers, the Israel-Iran conflict is only spiraling. Iran is targeting multiple civilian areas, including the Soar Medical Center in Beersheba. Estimates vary, but between 40 to 240 people were injured as a cluster munition was deployed against residential and medical facilities. The strike, which is being condemned by Israel as state terrorism, and in response, Israel has struck back hard with airstrikes across Iran, hitting nuclear sites at Arak, Nanats, Isfahan, and near Fordo. The IDF says the goal is to cripple Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure and apply pressure on Ayatollah Khomeini's regime. The death toll is mounting. In Washington, President Donald Trump is now weighing whether the US should join Israel's offensive against Iran and will reach a decision within 2 weeks, with diplomatic options still on the table. Now, all of this comes at a time when global powers are picking sides. The US will decide in 2 weeks, as I mentioned, on the strike plan, but Russia stands with Iran and is warning of a Chernobyl-like catastrophe if Israel attacks the Bushehr nuke plant. Let's go right across to our guest now. Joining us here in the studio is Major General Dhruv Katoch, Director of India Foundation. Ashok Sajanhar is a former diplomat joining us. But joining us from outside the studio are Adrian Calamel, fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute of Terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar from who's joining us is Ariel Whitman, who's an op-ed editor at the Global Spirit and host of the Western Spirit podcast. Dr. Doron Avital is ex-commander of Israel's elite special forces, the Sayeret Matkal, and former member of the Knesset and Foreign and Security Committee. Hussein Shafei is a philosopher and historian joining us. Asif Ramiz Dawoodi is a foreign policy expert joining us as well. Let's quickly open this up and take it across to our viewers in terms of what exactly we're looking at. Why is this such a big issue of concern? Let's look at the talking points over here. Primarily, this is what has happened as far as the strikes are concerned. Iran's strikes on Israel at Haifa, at Petah Tikva. We have seen Tel Aviv, Rehovot, Bat Yam, Rishon LeZion, as well as Beersheba that we saw take place on Thursday. Now, let's take a look at what have been Israel's strikes as far as Iran are concerned. Nanats, Arak, Fordo and Isfahan are the nuclear facilities that have been struck on Iran. There's also the energy facilities of the Shahran oil facility and the Fajr Jam gas plant that have in fact seen these kinds of attacks take place. Let's quickly take this across to our guests as well. Mr. Hussein Shafei, if I can begin with you, the big question over here is this, that at the moment we have seen that the United States, particularly the White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt, has come out to say that Iran has all that it needs to achieve a nuclear weapon. And it appears that it's not just Israel and the US, but several of the Western countries as well who are not in favor of Iran possessing a nuclear weapon at this point of time. Why is Iran pressing ahead with this despite the concerns that have been expressed globally?
So to just put it into perspective, Iran has not pursued a nuclear program. Iran came to the table happy to not have a nuclear program. However, the meeting that was supposed to take place, the negotiations, they made sure by trying to kill Ali Shamkhani, who is the negotiator on behalf of Iran. If Iran wanted to have a nuclear weapon, they would have had a nuclear weapon a long time ago. It's not part of the doctrine of Iran to have or need nuclear weapons to put pressure on its regional enemies and in support of their allies. As you can see quite well, Iran is able to deliver pain to Israel, and it has done over the last 4 or 5 or 7 days, in fact, and it's been very effective. And people need to understand, they were at the table discussing on how to dismantle the whole of the nuclear program, and we're talking about Iran's future nuclear programs, as well as asking Israel to actually join the NPT and stop them and their warheads, which everyone on the whole planet Earth knows exist, but everyone seems to wink and nudge and act like it doesn't exist. Why are they allowed to have nuclear weapons? Why are they allowed to have those things in our area?
All right, Dr. Doron Avital, would you like to respond to that? That we were at the negotiating table, we were not wanting to pursue any kind of nuclear weapons program, but if Israel can possess such a nuclear weapon, why shouldn't we? Respond to that comment coming in from Hussein Shafei.
This is, first of all, Israel never declared that we do possess nuclear weapon, but this is a strange argument. Iran is a state that tried for the last 10 or 20 years to really create through its proxy, like Hezbollah, and helping Hamas to really narrow Israel possibility in the Middle East. And if not for the 7th of October, I'm not sure the chain of events would lead us to this attack. And since the 7th of October, what we've seen going in Gaza and then what unfolded in the north with Hezbollah, once Hezbollah was taken off, it was the first time that Israel could really aim at Tehran. And the moment there was a declaration, not by us, but by the foreign institution that declare that the gap between the rhetoric of not pursuing a military nuclear program and what is really in the practice, once this gap was recognized, Israel reacted after Hezbollah was taken off, and this is the situation where the framing of the situation where we are here. That something should be clear. Iran for years is declaring that it wants to see Israel eliminated, taking a case which is not the Palestinian case, and this rhetoric, somebody can just wipe it out and say it's only rhetoric, but the rhetoric is equipped with ballistic missiles, as we see. You just recognize the hits on Israel, and by this nuclear program, which in the context of this current regime cannot be accepted by the West, not only by Israel.
Okay, it's something that cannot be accepted by the West. And let me also bring in Asif Ramiz Dawoodi, who's a foreign policy expert. Asif Ramiz Dawoodi, when you say that when Iran says that we are going to exit the NPT, then, this is going to definitely lead to concerns, because then the big question is, what are you going to pursue then? The safeguards that would otherwise have applied on Iran by the IAEA, etc., that will not apply. So obviously then there are going to be concerns that are going to be expressed globally, isn't it?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. And connecting this situation with Iraq is it reminds me and the entire world, especially those who are concerned about this region, about what had happened in Iraq earlier. And whenever it's talked about the nuclear programs from Iran and the involvement of Israel at this moment, there is a big question. There are many questions whether Israel should have attacked Iran for this reason or not, and what's the main purpose, what's the wider, the bigger thing behind this. That's a big question. Because here, what Israel has been doing for the past 2 years after the 7th October attack, we all condemn, I condemn personally what happened on 7th of October, but what's been happening after that for 2 years in Gaza and in Palestine, and, the innocent lives, tens of thousands of women and children, they were killed there. And it's just continuously going on. The world doesn't need another war, especially when it comes to the regional peace and security, when it comes to that Middle Eastern region where development is the prime focus at this moment for most of these governments there. When you talk about GCC, when you talk about Middle Eastern countries, if this happens, this is going to impact the entire world, that region, and also in somehow or the other, our own country, right. India. So here, the way Israel has interfered and intervened in this, the thing is whether it was needed, and if Iran is doing something which is not yet clear. Okay, it's, as you said, like Iraq, what happened there. So if Iran is doing this, whether Israel is there to stop it or there is a proper way. We live in a world.
Let me take that question across to Ariel Whitman. Ariel Whitman, the question that is being asked is whether there's a parallel to what happened as far as Iraq is concerned several years ago, because there as well there was talk of nuclear weapons, none were found later, but that did lead to an attack taking place as far as Iraq is concerned. Is a similar kind of case being built when it comes to Iran? And look at the kind of rhetoric. There's rhetoric of killing of leaders, all sorts of regime change, etc. That's also happening. Is that really the plan?
Well, I would just say that Iraq, yes, but in the 80s, when we took out the Iraqi nuclear weapons that in the 1980s, and that basically saved the West when they went in in the 90s and then in 2000s, they didn't have the nuclear weapons that we took them out. So at the same time, I think it's also one of your guests, the first guest, I forgot his name, sorry, I apologize. He said that the Iranians are able to do very bad harm to Israel, very extensive harm. I would just say that we're very surprised at the weak response by the Iranians. They have obviously shot a number of ballistic missiles that have gotten through, but every life is, is cherished, but it's not really a serious response by a powerful nation. They have shown themselves to be extremely weak. They have also, one of the things that people have said before, there'll be a regional war and World War III. Nothing like that even seems to be happening. Their Russian friends are running away from them. Their Chinese friends are running away from them. They don't want to have anything to do with them. They're all alone in the world right now. The Americans are threatening to come in. They're in real trouble. Whereas the Israelis, with all of our problems, we've shown that we have, by ourselves, been able to take out almost all of their nuclear facilities at this point, except for Fordo. The Americans might help us. The Israelis we might have to do it by ourselves. But I think it's a very weird case to make that the Iranians have shown they could do serious harm. 20-something people have died in Israel. Every life is something, but we have destroyed almost the entire nuclear scientists in Iran. We have destroyed almost all of the facilities, at least the above-ground facilities, and a lot of the underground facilities. 2/3 of their missiles launchers have been destroyed, of their ballistic missile launchers, in less than a week. And all they've been able to do is to shoot about a few hundred missiles at Israel and 20 people dead with every life. But they've shown themselves to be an extremely weak country. Extremely.
Okay. Hossein Shafii, since that's a comment in response to what you said, quick response from you before I go across to other panelists.
A response from me?
Yes.
I didn't hear it. Yeah. So, listen, I don't know what planet that you're on, but I'm watching stuff on X, and the stuff that I'm watching is Israel getting bombarded. Okay, well, you may be in Israel, but the thing is, your government has decided to put a law in place that no one's allowed to record video or share anything that's happening. Your society is in the dark. You're putting the world society in the dark. Every day I see a plume going up, a massive building getting destroyed, and Madhav turned around and said that Iran targeted an Israeli hospital. Well, Iran didn't attack a hospital. It attacked the Central Intelligence Command, and there was another building. It attacked those. And quite frankly, I don't know how to tell you this, but it is beyond hypocrisy, beyond absolute hypocrisy, to have Israelis telling us about people hitting hospitals. You have leveled every single hospital and medical center in Gaza. You've destroyed almost every hospital in southern Beirut. So you've got absolutely no ground to try and take the moral high ground here with people. And if you think that nothing's happening to your country and Iran's not able to do anything, release the people from being able to go wherever they want. Stop the German TV crews who are wanting to go and do recordings. They'll be told, no, you can't go there. Why are you doing that? Go on, do it. Let's see what happens. At the end of the day, Madhav, I just want to add another thing that, in answer to the first speaker. This is not a war about nuclear weapons. This war is about one thing and one thing only. It's about Iran standing up for the Palestinians, for the Lebanese, if I may, or do you want me to stop? Because what people understand is, in the last year and a half, 2 years, we've heard this word, the Greater Israel, Yam Israel Rai or something. This was not the conversation that was happening before. However, now it's come into existence. They've taken over southern Syria. They've taken over and destroyed whatever they can in the Golan Heights. Iran is the last bastion and power that's able to stop Israel.
Quick response from Arian. Arian, quick response from you, 30 seconds, please, and then I move on to the next part of this debate. Arian.
Can I just respond by saying that there's no law like that. So obviously there's places that are, when the shooting is happening, people are not allowed to come close because of danger, because we don't want things to come out to let the Iranians know which missiles were shot where. But I can send your guest all the videos of everything. Obviously, buildings have been hit. Obviously, places have been hit. And obviously, people have been killed. That's not the point. The point is that we knew that this would happen going in. We knew that people would die. But we took the chance, and we thought it would be much worse. And it's a very weak response. And I would just say one last thing, if I may, about the fact it's pretty amazing that a Western person is sitting here and defending a regime that literally kills gay people and hangs them from cranes and doesn't
Big
allow
question.
women to uncover
Excellent.
their head. It's pretty amazing. It's actually,
All right, gentlemen, I think we're veering way off the kind of debate that we really should be having at this point of time because they're global concerns. And I'm going to request you all to hold on to your thoughts. I'm going to go across to the next set of panelists in just a minute. But I want to quickly just update our viewers with what exactly has been happening and why this is such an important issue of global concern, the number of countries involved, so on and so forth. Look at what are the options before America. A 2-week window has been announced by the United States. The first option, if diplomacy succeeds, of course, the implications are that the U.S. opts out of the war. Point number one being made. The other implication is that Iran would then resume talks if it's possible at all, and regional escalation in that situation can perhaps be halted. The second option is that if diplomacy fails, the U.S. joins Israel in limited strikes that take place as far as Iran is concerned. The focus then will be on nuclear facilities such as Fordo. There's also, of course, the larger aspect of risk of more Iranian reprisals in such a situation. And then, of course, the third option is of a military escalation. The implications of this are a full U.S. military action, if it's possible at all, an Iranian aggression which then hits at the U.S. assets. Remember that Iran has also been preparing for this in many, many ways. Long-term regional instability, of course, then comes into question, and of course, number of implications for that as well. Let's take a quick look at some of the other implications. The world's most powerful have pretty much picked sides. We see that with Israel is the United States. They will decide on a strike Iran plan. With Iran at the moment are Russia, which has warned of a Chernobyl-like catastrophe. We're also looking at the US, which has said that within the next 2 weeks, they're going to be carrying out this attack. Russia has said that if Israel attacks Bushehr nuke plant, that's the kind of implication that they're looking at in terms of what really it's there. What really are we looking at in terms of Israel's requirement or dependence on the United States? This is where it becomes very important because in terms of military hardware, the bunker buster bombs particularly become very important because this is something the US has, which Israel does not have to take out the nuclear facilities as far as Iran is concerned. And that's why the question of whether the United States joins in this entire conflict becomes extremely, extremely important. The BLU-109, of course, as we've been discussing, weighs about 250 kilograms, carried by jets and can penetrate as deep as at the depth of 16 to 20 feet. This is something that Israel itself has. Let's look at the next bomb. It's the GBU-28 that we're talking about, which can have this kind of depth of 16 to 20 feet. If we can quickly move on, it's 1,800 to 2,300 kilogram bomb carried by jets, and it can strike at a depth. This is the GBU-57, which can strike at the depth of nearly 200 feet. This is owned by the United States. 13,600 kilograms carried by a stealth bomber is what they're looking at. Let's quickly try and understand what really are the implications of all of this. Major General Dhruv Katoch, if you can explain this for our viewers from the military perspective, hardware that Israel has, which can penetrate a certain depth, but they certainly cannot penetrate at the kind of depth that we are looking at what the US can potentially do, which is why this becomes a complete game changer. But there are a lot of risks attached as well when you're talking about targets being nuclear in nature, the risk of contamination, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Madhav. Madhav, when I've been looking at this war, and I've been discussing with the Israelis, not from now, for the last 10 years at least, their concern has always been a nuclear Iran nuking them. Now, you can see that when you look at the present conflict, so many missiles have actually hit Iran. I beg your pardon, have hit Israel. Now, what happens if one of them had a bomb? The entire country would have been wiped out, and that is the situation which is unacceptable to Israel. That is really their bottom line. There is nothing more, nothing less. Ideological battles can keep going on, but this is their primary concern. Now, for them, if you have to stop this war, they have to stop the very idea of Iran producing a nuclear weapon. That's it. And preferably also a missile which can reach them. Now, at this point of time, yes, they don't have this bomb which can go 200 feet to actually take out that site. But if the Americans come in, then that site will go. So, prior to that, hopefully, if there is some sort of an accord and Iran actually comes to the table and says, we will not go that route. But the question is, for the last, every time I've been hearing it from the Iranian side, the Ayatollahs have been claiming that they will destroy Israel. Now, the point is, if you're going to say it, then the other party will believe you're going to do it. So if you think you're not going to do it, then don't say it. Either it's an empty threat or it is something. If I'm an Israeli, I will take it seriously. that every time the senior most leadership of the Iranians are saying, we will destroy you. So for Israel, I think this is the bottom line. Now, for America, I'm not very sure if the Americans will get in. I have a feeling this 2 weeks window is a very long time, and you can't throw missiles at each other 1,500 kilometers distance and fight a war. That is not something which can happen. There will be.
But they
exhaustion.
moved in their fleet, they moved in their fighter jets, etc. We've seen those reports also
coming. It doesn't really matter. You see, the fighter jets today, the way the standoff distances are taking place, those days of 2 jets fighting each other, they are gone. The air defense environment is too dense. You can't do it. We saw what happened in Operation Sindhu. None of our aircraft crossed into Pakistani space, yet we destroyed those targets.
Right.
So we are going to have standoff distances, and it's a different battle now. So, when we are looking at this, I have a feeling that if the Americans are giving a 2 weeks window, they are actually hoping it will be over before they have to come in. So he doesn't have to make a decision.
Right.
The last point, how does it concern us? I think we, as India, Asia, and the rest of all the people who are oil energy dependent. I think our major concern is that if you continue fighting like this and it impacts the oil, it impacts the world.
Undoubtedly, that's a very important point. We're going to get to that in great depth. In fact, I have some of those graphics on that point as well. I'm going to come to that in some detail. But I want to bring in Adrian into this. Adrian, what are we to make of the kind of statements that have been coming in from the White House? First, there's a kind of threat that comes in, that they're not going to engage in talks. Then you have President Trump coming out to say, whether we will, whether we won't, we'll make up our mind. Then we're told that there's another 2 weeks. Obviously, President Trump has a lot riding at stake because he's someone who's been projected as someone who's against wars, someone who ends wars, yet he's in a situation where he's having to threaten Iran with violence. Is that threat going to work? Will the US finally have to engage on ground? What can we expect, Adrian?
Well, thank you for having me. And you look back to his first term, the first 2 years we're trying to deal with this regime. The next 2 years were maximum pressure campaign, kinetic actions around the margins, and knows that this regime is not a regime that will negotiate in good faith. They never have, they never will. So he put a 60-day time clock on them, and what we saw was, our one guest is talking about Ali Shamkhani. This is a guy who is saying he's negotiating for the Islamic Republic. He had the Ali Khamenei's ear. He was the person responsible for brutalizing 92 million Iranians. So Trump's policy was always clear. The Iranians' hubris should have looked back. They should have looked back to his first term and said, there's some change in personnel. There's some ambiguity, deliberate ambiguity with individuals like Steve Witkoff, and he does have some pulling inside his own administration, but his decision's made up. There's no enrichment, no reprocessing. The Islamic Republic would be the first country in the world that reprocesses, enriches, and doesn't possess a nuclear weapon. And one last point. The original JCPOA, one of the big issues with it, this is, again, negotiating with the Islamic Republic over decades, was not addressing the ballistic missiles. Well, we're seeing the ballistic missiles now and what the effect of that is having. So you can't take this regime, and there were supposed to be mechanisms in order by the European partners, by UN, snapback measurements. None of these happened. So the regime does not negotiate in good faith. Ali Khamenei will never give up his right to enrich, or reprocess because he wants that nuke, believes it's critical to the survival of the regime, and that means Fordo's on the list because that and Natanz are the enrichment sites that need to be taken care of. Trump's mind is made up. I don't give it 2 weeks. I give it maybe 3-4 days before something happens.
3 or 4 days before something happens. Is that really going to happen, Ashok Sajanar? Because look at the kind of statements Trump has been making. He says, we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He's an easy target, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out, in brackets, kill, ! At least not for now. We don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I mean, there are so many thoughts in that one paragraph. One really, while he's trying to project that certainly they want to go ahead and attack like the way in which Adrian has been telling us, he's also hedging his bets at the same time, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Madhav, for having me on the show. You're very right. I think all these are elements, as the last speaker was saying, these are all elements of the maximum pressure campaign. I don't think he really wants to get into it because, his MAGA base is against it and, they don't want these forever wars to sort of, want more of that. He had promised, when he'd come that he's going to stop the Russia-Ukraine conflict, he's going to stop the Israel-Gaza, etc. He's not really been able to do anything of that sort. So I don't think he'll be very loath to really get into another war. But all these maximum pressure sort of things, he wants to put them into operation. And I think this 2 weeks and a few days, a couple of days or so, I think that is all basically being provided to Israel to degrade whatever it can as far as Iran is concerned, so that Iran will be forced to come to the negotiating table. You see, some of the arguments that have been made that Iran doesn't want to have highly enriched uranium, which is whether weapon grade, etc., etc. I think if that was the case, then it should have really have come to an agreement. And if it had come to an agreement, I don't think we would have had, some situation like this. Because I think in addition to Israel, why is it that, this has been going on for the last 8 days, as you said, Madhav? There is not a single country in the region which has really come out actively in support of Iran. Because I think those countries in the region are
Russia and China have at some level, haven't they? Haven't Russia and China come out?
I'm talking about the region.
Okay.
I'm talking about the region. I'm talking about the Muslim world, basically.
Yes.
That, at some level, because, these are nuclear weapon states, these are nuclear powers. But I'm talking about this. These countries are very wary of Israel having, Iran having a nuclear weapon. Because they know that, for the time being, Hezbollah is being heavily emasculated. Hamas has been emasculated. Houthi still continues to be there. In Syria, in Iraq, there are elements. Because if Iran gets it, then the nuclear weapon, there is no guarantee, there's no surety that is not going to travel to other places.
Absolutely.
So I think as far as America is concerned, as far as the other Western countries, I think by and large the world does not want more nuclear weapon states.
Nuclear warheads, which countries, how many? Let's take a quick look at that before we get into the next part of the debate. United States, 5,225. The UK at 225. Russia at 5,580. France at 290. We're also looking at Pakistan at 170, as well as Israel with 90. This is, of course, India at 172. This is the total number of warheads that exist globally. Of course, China at 600 and North Korea at 50. Who can forget that as well? These are, of course, as far as the numbers stack up globally. Let me quickly take this question across and the concerns across to our other guests as well. Let me bring in at this point of time Asif Ramiz Dawoodi. Asif Ramiz Dawoodi, what is the biggest concern being expressed by some of the panelists is that if Iran does get that nuclear weapon, what's the guarantee that it will remain only with Iran? It won't go to other regimes which perhaps might use them very irresponsibly.
Well, it's too early to comment on this. And if I tell you honestly, first thing is whether Iran is going to have this nuclear weapon or not. And then if they have it, then whether they can keep it with themselves or it's going to be shared with others, as there is in your question as well. Now, my question is that if a country is working on a nuclear program, for example, and as Ambassador Sajjan Har also mentioned, that the world doesn't need any more nuclear states. I agree. But the question is whether Israel has the authority or whether any particular country or its prime minister or its government has the authority to interfere and to stop another country to do anything of this sort. So why the connection is, can this be seen in isolation without connecting this to what is happening in Palestine, what is happening in Gaza, and what has been happening for the past 2 years and in this entire history of Palestine, Israel. So it cannot be seen in isolation. And here, as I was telling you last time also, that we live in a world where we have rule of law, where we have international laws, where we have some processes, where we have, so here who the Israel is or any particular country to attack any other country for this reason, and doesn't it have any connection with what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in Palestine, and what has...
Dr. Doron Avital, let me bring in Dr. Doron on that. Dr. Doron Avital, is it all connected? Ultimately, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine, is it all connected with the actions of Israel? That's the question coming in from the previous panelists. And if a country is part of the, and has its, NPT signatoryship as far as its own nuclear program is concerned, isn't it entitled to go ahead and enrich, the nuclear material?
Okay, so first, let's look at Lebanon and Syria. Both of them are very excited not to have the Iranian command over the system. Lebanon is trying to resurrect itself as a state that has one law, one weapon. Syria is trying to build itself without Iranian intervention. So Iranian intervention in the northern parts of Israel doesn't serve not the case of those states, and I'm not sure it serves the case of the Palestinian. Look at the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian issue is a big issue, it's a big divider of the Israeli society. Of course, I and many like me would have liked to see it comes to some end game. For sure, we need an end game for Gaza. It has nothing to do with Iran playing its hands in the north, in two states, intervening in its internal politics. This is unacceptable. As to the nuclear thing, I think the international community has its concern according to about this regime, about the rationality of the decision-making of this regime. And it's not only the stand of Israel, it's a position that Israel took with its coalition members, the West and the European. We heard the German chancellor, we hear the French that are more... they want to go to the negotiation table for sure. So this campaign, I hope, would end with some settled negotiation that would make sense to us, to the West, and those exchange of blows would end. If not, America would have to step in, and then let's see.
Right. And in fact, let's take a quick look at some of the other graphics that we have as well on this. In fact, this is, of course, what really has happened as far as India is concerned. Indians in Israel are around 105,000. This is the number of Indians who've been caught in the crossfire in Iran. Much lesser number, but still significant at 10,765. Of course, several of them have been brought back as well. Indians in the Gulf and West Asia, this number much higher, almost a crore here at about 90 lakhs. That's the total number as far as Indians who perhaps could get in the middle of this entire crossfire. Let's also take a look at what it means for India. If you can quickly bring up the next set of graphics as well. In terms of the implications of this, the possible choke point disruptions. One is, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, Iran would be very, very clearly able to control. There's, of course, the Cape of Good Hope and, of course, the Red Sea over here that we're also talking about. The big options are in terms of the route of Russian oil via the Cape of Good Hope in case the oil stops flowing from the Middle East. The fallout, of course, in case of this is that it increases the transportation time as well as cost for India in terms of the oil coming in from these particular places as well. So this really, of course, is what we were talking about earlier. Major Dhruv Katoch, the energy dependency on the Middle East is a big concern for India. We're a huge consumer of this oil, and this could lead to a huge economic impact because already we've seen, even before the full-blown fighting has begun, that the price per barrel has gone up for Brent crude by about $1.25.
I agree that we have got, the diaspora in West Asia is very large. But I don't think that is going to be a major problem. The diaspora is not going to move. This is a localized conflict. People keep talking about it as a third World War potential, no, nothing like that. There are two countries fighting which are separated by 1,500 kilometers and they're using missiles. That is the bottom line. So I don't visualize this spreading out to anywhere else except on the ocean. And there, if you block the routes, that is going to be one problem. The larger problem, which hopefully doesn't come out, is what happens if Israel starts hitting the oil fields of Saudi Arabia and there's a retaliation. Now, if both the oil fields start getting hit and they start committing, in a sense, oil suicide, then I think the oil prices are going to double and triple and go 4 times. They're going to go beyond.
But is that really a likely possibility?
It is low, but it is possible.
It's low, but it's possible. You agree with that, Ashok Sajjan? I saw you shaking your head.
Not really. Meaning what's happening is, at the moment, there is just between Israel and Iran. If the conflagration does not spread to the whole region, as we have seen, Russia, Ukraine, when that started, people thought, that the whole of Europe is going to get engulfed. It didn't happen. When Israel-Hamas happened, it spread also to Lebanon, it spread to some of the other regions, but it has not been a region-wide. And that's the point that I was making, that, no country is coming. They didn't come to the aid of the Palestinians. They are not coming to the aid of Iran. So if it is limited only to this, and Iran is not compelled to block the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20%, then it's not only going to be the route that is there, but it is the total supply of energy in the global market that's going to come down, and that's going to have an increase in the price. It could get more regional if America were to come in and maybe even not only use its bombs in Fordo to reach the centrifuges and enrichment units there, and then Iran responds to America has about 50,000 troops in that area. And so it keeps on escalating and it keeps on getting bigger and bigger. That is the real danger. And I think that is the reason why Mr. Trump has, made this announcement 2 weeks so that Israel can do whatever it thinks is proper.
It needs to be done, yeah.
And Iran can come to the negotiating table so that America will not really have to go in with its weaponry, with its advanced, this bunker
buster bombs. Yeah. Let me bring in Ariel on that. Ariel, is that a likely possibility in your view? And what is the possibility of this actually becoming a larger Middle Eastern conflagration? That's a question on everyone's minds at the moment.
I think there's really pretty much, I would say, almost no chance that this goes more than Iran versus Israel, because as the previous guest said, most of the other countries are really cheering on Israel. They've said what they need to say so their local populations will be, happy. But the Egyptians don't want the Iranians to get nuclear weapons. The Saudis hate the Iranians. The Gulf states hate the Iranians. Iran's neighbors, immediate neighbors, hate them and don't want them to have nuclear weapons. Iran is a pariah state. The more we talk about it like it's sort of a legitimate conflict here between two, countries that are at the same level, it's a little bit like missing the point, because Iran has been. I'll just want one last thing say about the fact that one of our guests asked if it's okay for Israel to take out the Iranian nuclear program just by itself. I would just say that Iran has struck Israel through the years, but let's say even since October 7th, Hamas has been 100% funded by Iran. Hezbollah is 100% funded by Iran. They both have struck Israel, killed hundreds, if not thousands of Israelis at this point, injured tens of thousands. The Iranians hit Israel twice before this over the last 2 years. To say that Israel is just like unilaterally attacking Iran out of nowhere is just missing the whole point and just not looking at reality. And also, when a country says, this is one of your other guests said, when a country says we're going to wipe you out of the earth, and then it's also developing weapons that can actually do that. And we're a very small country here. We have 10 million people. We're the size of the state of New Jersey, for those who know American geography. 1 or 2 nuclear warheads could do extreme damage to us. Okay. We're not like a giant country.
Okay, let me put that question across to Hussein Shafii. Hussein Shafii, one, the problem of the rhetoric, with several leaders from Iran coming out to repeatedly say we'll wipe you out, and that leads to an existential crisis as far as Israel is concerned. There's the other question that many have raised about the lack of support that Iran has received in the entire region. How do you explain these two questions?
So I'm going to, if you don't mind, Madhav, I've written some notes for the comments that people have said, and I'm just going to go through them, if I may, and it does answer your questions. Sure. So Iran has never said it wants to wipe out Israel. What it wants to wipe out is this government, this state that believes in its ethno-supremacy. It does not want it to be able to just kill people left, right, and center. The fact that Hamas has attacked them, it's within its rights under the UN Charter to attack Israel. Why? Because Israel is a colonizing force. So they have a right to do that. I want to just talk about American foreign policy, is that Israel can bomb whoever it wants, whenever it wants. Iran cannot defend itself, its borders, without being called a menace. That just sounds like colonialism again. So the only right is for Israel to do whatever it wants, and whatever it wants is attack people. And you talked about none of Iran's neighbors like it. How many of Israel's neighbors like it? Are you like having parties with Egyptians, Jordanians, Lebanese, Syrians. Who likes you in the area? You're the most hated state in the world. Right now, Israel's reputation is in the bin. You don't have one country in Europe that doesn't have a negative, minus 40%, negative attitude towards Israel because of what you've done in Gaza. You need to understand that. That's what's happening.
Hussein Shafai, may I correct you there? Just a few days ago, we saw the German Chancellor come out and say that Israel's doing the West's dirty work. Isn't that a massive endorsement?
No, listen to me. There is a huge difference between the governments of Germany, Britain, France, and the people. I said the sentiment amongst the people. The German people, the French people, the Spanish, the English, all of them are watching what's happening. Our eyes are wide open to these videos that are coming in 4K of the violence that's been met on children. There's no need for these children to be killed. But they are doing it in front of the world's eyes, and our governments are supplying them with the weapons, the intel, and everything else to be able to do it. And I wanted to say to your other speaker about the Gulf countries don't want to support Iran. They didn't support Gaza. You think they're going to come and support Iran? These regimes are all loyal to Israel, one way or another, through a business deal, through their relations with America. And listen, Iran does not need anyone to come and do anything for us.
Okay.
We will fight on our own 2 feet, and if Israel carries on doing what it's going to do...
Quick closing comment from you on that, Ashok Sajanar. How much of that do you agree with?
Well, you know what he said, that all these regimes in the region, they love Israel because they are doing so much of business. And just before that, you know, an absolutely contradictory statement saying that no one loves Israel and Israel is hated by all. So I think, you know, you look at the Abraham Accords, Saudi Arabia was just about to sign the Abraham Accord and have diplomatic relations. You have the I2U2, India, Israel, US, UAE, etc. Those. You have the IMEC. There are countries which want to collaborate and I think which want to have a peaceful region so that, you know, all of them can prosper. And I think it was moving in that particular direction till the 7th of October 2023, because before that, you had some of these countries, whether it's Bahrain, UAE, etc., they had established diplomatic relations with Israel. But whatever is happening, I think, in Gaza, I think there is a point that the speakers have made in terms of the death, damage, destruction. I think the international humanitarian law needs to be respected and that needs to be provided. India itself has provided aid to that, and I think in that context, definitely there could be some changes. All right.
We'll have to wrap up this edition of the National Debate. I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us. Asif Ramiz Dawoodi, Hussein Shafi, as well as Dr. Doron Avital, Ariel Whitman, Adrian Calamel, as well as Ashok Sajanar and Major General Dhruv Katoch. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of the National Debate.